Good afternoon, everybody. I'm William Warner. I'm with USC Arts and Action, part of Visions and Voices, the Arts and Humanities Initiative. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's event, New Leaders Now, Artists Advancing Racial Justice, part of our current series titled Foresight Is 2020, Racial Justice and the Arts. And I'm really excited to be sharing online space with four such tenacious young artists and organizers today. As I introduce each of these four guys, asking them one little icebreaker question, which is, if you could have one thing free from a vending machine for the rest of your life, what would it be? And it can be anything. It can be an object, a concept, an emotion, a person. And if you guys want to write in the chat what your object would be as well, what you would like to receive, feel free to do that, and we'll look at those at the same time. So without further ado, first things first, Mato is a musician, filmmaker, and spoken word artist born and raised in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. While completing his degree in USC School of Cinematic Arts, he's released multiple music projects, including 2018's Part-Time Indian and 2019's Scatterbrain, which explore his complex identity as a mixed enrolled member of the Oglala Lakota Sioux tribe from Pine Ridge. Mato, are you there? What would your free vending machine item be?
Hi everyone, my free vending machine things, I got 3: handmade jewelry, new music, and those big boyfriend hoodies. I want a lot of those.
3, it was 1, but okay, you can have it. Nice one. I'm seeing excellent ramen, water come in the chat. Nice one. Next, we have Bri Mims. Bri is a movement artist, facilitator, and abolitionist. She's a recent graduate from USC's Kaufman School of Dance, and she uses art, research, and facilitation as a catalyst for self-exploration, civic engagement, healing, and dialogue. Her continuing Jail Bed Drop project consists of a series of performances and interactive installations rooted in challenging our inherent notion of crime and punishment. Hello, Bri.
Hello, hello.
Hello. And what would your lifelong vending machine item be?
So I would want home cooked meals, like 3 for a meal for the whole day. And then I would want my snacks and maybe a couple of desserts. And I would want it to switch out each day. So it would be a new fresh batch. So then I wouldn't have to cook anything. That would be ideal.
So far, I'd say you guys are totally abusing the concept of one free item for the rest of your life. That's okay. Fine. Millennials, won't take no for an answer. Okay. Thank you, Bri. Anushka Joshi is the co-founder and editor-in-chief of GEN-ZiNE, a publication dedicated to addressing contemporary issues through the eyes of Generation Z. At USC, she studies communication with a minor in media, economics, and entrepreneurship, and she's committed to designing media for social change. Anushka believes in the power of storytelling to empower communities and echo unheard voices. Anushka, hello. What would you like to have on hand every day for the rest of your life? You can say 5 things if you want.
Well, I only have one, and I'm pretty sure I have unlimited access to it as it is, but I would say humor and laughter and good times. That's what I want.
That is a key. It's a good one. Thank you. And last but most certainly not least, we have Jakevis Thomason, who graduated from the USC Kaufman School of Dance in 2020. He's quickly gaining recognition and acclaim as both a choreographer and creative director for screen and stage. Since 2018, Jakevis has worked closely with choreographer Frank Gatson, who is the creative director for recording artists such as Jennifer Lopez, Rihanna, and Beyonce. No idea who any of these people are. And he eventually hopes to have his own company to showcase his works. Jakevis, hello.
Hi.
How's it going?
Going good.
What's your vending machine item?
Okay, so I'm conflicted with new music and food because those are actually 2 that I would do as well. So I'm gonna have to abuse it as well and go with new music and food.
You're all like pretending that you're noble artists and you select like music. It's always food, come on.
Yeah, it literally is always food.
Amazing, thank you everybody. So some of the things I saw come in: water, excellent ramen from Christine, that's a good one for sure. Vending machine item from Oakland would be hugs in person. We all miss those for sure as well, yeah. A constant stream of self-confidence and courage, yeah. We wouldn't want that. All right, so I wanted just to begin with a question for all of you. We're living through turbulent, in many cases distressing times. What are some things that are giving you hope right now as artists and as people?
I think for me, it's the power of collaboration and supporting one another and also creating together is always a way of building community and also building meaning, deeper meaning in our relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think for me, it's been family throughout all of this. When it's safe to see them, it's been really inspiring and motivating. And it kind of grounds you a little bit, you know, it can humble you and also just remind you why you do what you do. And that's been super helpful throughout the past, 7 or 8 months.
Yeah. Yeah. Something a lot of people are missing right now, for sure.
Yeah, I would have to say faith. I'm Christian, so whatever you personally believe in, but I think faith is definitely something that has given me hope and something that's keeping me positive during times like this.
For me, I would say community, and then also the progress. Sometimes it feels really minor and there's so much more to do, but seeing those little baby steps, it makes me really hopeful.
Can you elaborate, Bri, like some of those instances of progress that we've seen, which are really inspiring?
Yeah, something that has made me really excited is that this idea of abolition is kind of a mainstream conversation right now. I think a year ago today, the connotation was just so negative around what the idea of abolition was. And so to go on social media and see it be all over my feed is just like, whoa. So those sort of baby steps give me hope.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. It feels like touching on the very personal to the very macro, and how we need both of those things to keep us going at the moment, it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you, a question for the group as well, how would you describe what it is that drives you as artists and creators? What are some things that have brought you to where you are today? Some of those values and convictions. And I guess also, do you feel like your roles have changed during this year in that regard? Do you see yourselves differently given what we've gone through?
I think for me, it kind of stems from a place of not guilt, but rather like the impossibility of being complacent when you kind of wake up and realize that the world is not at all what you thought it was, and never being able to revert your perspective. I feel a sense of duty in using anything, any energy I was going to do in any other activity for the work I do today.
Yeah, just going off of that, I think something that definitely drives me is the feeling of not knowing what's happening tomorrow. So feeling like wanting to move quick and act fast and say whatever is on your heart or mind, or get whatever you're wanting to out. Because it's been a crazy year. I think that we can all agree on that. And not knowing what's going to happen next has definitely been something to drive me and to keep me motivated into doing what I want to do now rather than waiting till later because it's not promised. And that hasn't changed really so much as of right now. I'm still sort of in that place of still getting done. It takes time, I understand that, but I'm still in the process of like getting done what I want to get out, because like I just said, it's not promised. So yeah, that's something that's been motivating me.
Yeah, I really like that concept of nothing is promised to us, right? Not waiting. And I think you've all exemplified that with how you grabbed those opportunities as young artists already, for sure.
Yeah, especially me, since I'm a procrastinator, so that can come in a lot.
Yeah, I think what has been driving a lot of my work for a while is this idea that, my art practice is being used as the cultural shift that is needed to create sustainable change alongside of the policy shifts. I think that a lot of the work is happening on the policy level, and I'm always trying to figure out, how do we keep up with that on a cultural level to make sure, like I said, that there's sustainable change that's happening. So I think a lot of that is driving my art practice and the work that I present.
Thank you.
For me, it's an idea of, I call it survival mode. And it's recently I guess it's kind of been literal with COVID and everything, but usually I just use it as a figure of speech in terms of coming from such a marginalized population as being Indigenous. There's not a lot of time to not, I guess, just strive towards what it is you want to achieve. Because for me, it's always a generational thing about, it's not the impact that I'm going to make, it's the impact that we will make, and the next generation, what are they going to feel? If you can influence one kid, then they might influence 10 kids, and they might influence 100 kids. So it's always been this idea of, survival mode, and making sure that I can do everything I can to make sure that these next generations are able to thrive the best they can.
It's a really lovely way of putting it. I mean, sticking with that about the historical context as well, and about where it sits within what's gone before. And I wanted to ask you guys, this is a conversation about America, but it's also a conversation about your experiences at USC and the University of Southern California. And as artists and people of color, what it's been like to navigate an institution which in many ways has historically kind of reinforced and projected a sense of whiteness, and where USC needs to change in that regard, and what your hopes are for this current moment that the university finds itself in. And you can speak freely about that.
Yeah, coming from Kaufman, well, getting my BFA in dance from Kaufman, and I don't know, Brianna can speak to this as well, but I have experienced, for sure I've experienced racism, but I think the conversations that are starting to stir up are being acknowledged and respected, and they're continuing, which is nice to hear. I feel like a lot of institutions may not have that conversation that's constantly stirring, and people asking what can they do, how can they change, what can they do to help. I think that's what's been nice about Kaufman. USC specifically, it's kind of hard to navigate that sometimes when there's not a lot of people who look like you around on campus, especially in Kaufman. I was the only Black guy in my class, so at times it can be hard in order to find those other perspectives that are like yours, and people who you can talk to and engage with. I don't know, for me, it's been trying to find those, once you find those other people on campus or around, you feel that sense of community. But at times it was difficult for me to find that on campus, to find other people I can relate to and to talk to, because like I said, there's not that many of us on campus as of now. But I think the constant conversations that we're having is needed in every facility, not just Kaufman. It's needed in Marshall, it's needed in Viterbi, it's needed in every single part of USC in order for these changes to start happening. And what I've been hearing from other students is that it has been going on. There's been changes like protocol to curriculum, which is great, but I don't think it needs to get to a point of stopping. It needs to keep going. It needs to keep circulating, because I feel like the moment that we let it die down and there's not things being asked or things being said, that's the moment where the conversation dies down, and then the problem becomes less and less important. And it's not, it's important, it matters, it always has and it always will. So yeah, I think the university definitely needs to keep the conversation going and not changing a couple of things and thinking that's gonna solve it. Personally speaking, that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you.
about USC.
Yeah.
I relate to where you're coming from, and just earlier this week, actually it's Monday, so I guess last week, I was saying I'm tired of being the only brown person in the room, where a lot of my friends are white, and it's just like I feel a sense, a more maybe global perspective based on like where my family grew up, or the ability to empathize more naturally with other races and whatnot. And so with that comes a different burden almost of having to be the constant like deliver of bad news, or of being the one to point out this like white supremacy and whatnot. And kind of there's been a lot of responses from the school, but it's also addressing it with the student body itself and asking everyone to like recognize in their own lives what they're doing, whether it's negative or positive, and just to like address and analyze their own behaviors a bit more too. I think it's has to happen on a ground level as well as on a more systemic level as well.
Yeah.
I think something that I experienced a lot in my undergrad was this notion of apathy, and that was really hard, and I'm sure the other students can relate. And I was joking with my roommates earlier that today is Indigenous Peoples Day, but every other day is Columbus Day, because that's kind of what, in a microcosm, that's what we were dealing with a lot at USC. And I was the president of the Native American Student Union, which is now an assembly. Shout out to them. But through those 4 years, it was a constant, exhausted effort to try to become an assembly, because as you know, as you're an assembly, you're invited into USG and you get more funding and you get more opportunities to basically, expand. And so as a union, we weren't able to do too much, which was really unfortunate. And they put these bylaws that didn't allow us to become an assembly because we didn't have enough people. So it was this counterintuitive effort to try to become more recognized. So that was something we dealt with a lot, and I can only speak personally, but similar to what the other students have said, in the past couple of years, you start to see that momentum change. And it's kind of shifting more. And so the dialogue is there and the exchange is there. And even with the land recognition, the other Visions and Voices events that I've gone to in the past, that was not the case. That was never even stated. So yeah, it's exciting to see the change, but similar to what they said, there's a lot more effort to be made.
Yeah, sure.
I agree with a lot of the things you all said, and I'm happy to know that conversations are being had and change is being made. During my time at USC, I honestly, I felt like I knew what I was getting myself into. I was going into an institution that strives off of capitalism and such. So I really went in with how can I finesse and use this to get the resources and the things that I need to get done. So that was kind of my approach. So I was kind of just
yeah.
So yeah, that was pretty much my experience.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting about the choices that you make in order to get what you need out of an experience, and also knowing what else is contained within that institution. It can be very difficult to navigate. So yeah, Bri, sticking with you, I wanted to go into some individual questions actually. You're someone who wears many hats, as you said in your bio, facilitator, abolitionist, movement artist. We'll come to that in a minute. But for those that might not know, a huge part of your work over the last couple of years has been about abolition through your art and activism. And we're going to take a look at some of that work in a second. But before doing that, I wanted to ask you why has that issue remained at the very forefront of all that you do as an artist, it feels like?
Yeah, I really believe in the idea of an abolitionist framework, from a personal to a cultural to a political practice, is something that we need to live, to be more healthy, to feed our well-being, to be self-actualized, dignified on both a personal and a communal level. And like I said, my work is really about making sure that we're aligned culturally and politically with what's going on.
Yeah. So jail bed drop is an expression of that continuing work around prison abolition. So we've got a short film which we're going to share now, which kind of explains a little bit about, well, it kind of gives a representation of some of that work. So let's take a look at jail bed drop.
From the perception of the multisensory human, the intention behind an action determines its effects.
There are more than 300,000 prisoners in California alone.
Every intention affects both us and others.
A situation that bordered on fascism.
And the effects of intentions extend far beyond the physical world.
Amazing. So that, for people who might not know, that was Bri in the mask. Yeah, seeing some claps for Anushka there. So talk a little bit about that installation and how that's worked and some of the kind of the most memorable aspects of that piece of work that you've been touring.
Mm-hmm. So I first would like to say that Joe Bed Drop started with Justice LA in 2017 when I was a part of their creative action team. And this version that has kind of evolved was an extension of my senior project. And actually some clips that were in that video was from that presentation at CAM. So this work, there's two structures that you saw. One is the room, which is the same dimensions of a prison cell. And then you have the dome structure, which was kind of like the childhood dome climber. So we're bringing children back into the conversation, but once put in the context of the performance, it becomes emblematic of the prison industrial complex in the ways in which it's interconnected with just about everything in the United States. And the room then becomes an altar space. It becomes a sacred space once put in the context of the performance, because we're putting items into the space from system impacted people throughout the performance. So the performance element is me and Bindu Swami Nathan, and Bindu is doing spoken word, I'm doing movement. She's also moving these items into the room. And we're exploring ideas of accountability, of care, of safety, of human touch, all of these things that are in relationship to the PIC and the carceral state and the way in which it functions. And then after this performance element, the installation becomes interactive. So you can go inside of the room and there's a book and you can read about the stories of behind each item. Then on the outside walls of the room, there is a timeline of mass incarceration in the US. And on the other side, there's normally a call to action. For a while, it was Measure R. And then on the back side wall of the room, there's question cards that ask questions of like, what makes someone deserving of imprisonment? So abolition always is trying to break this notion of the deserving versus the undeserving. There's questions around accountability. They're very direct in terms of the system and the ideologies that surround it. Then inside of the dome, there are more personal questions in regards to, is human touch important to you? What makes you feel safe? What would you like to see in your community? So they're very personal questions. So the goal was to have different access points to this conversation. So people are connecting to our personal experience via the performance as it relates to some of these ideologies that uphold the PIC. Sorry, I'm gonna stop using abbreviations. The prison industrial complex. And then you have these personal stories from system impacted people, and system impacted people are both folks formerly incarcerated, currently incarcerated, and the family members of those folks as well. Because those are great impacts that also need to be included in the conversation. Then we have breaking down the ideologies from a very systemic standpoint. And then we have some of these just like basic morals and values and unpacking those and then reflecting those values back onto the system from those cards that are question slips that are inside of the dome.
Mm.
So that's pretty much the scope of the work.
Yeah, it's a hugely ambitious project, and when I've seen it done, it's really, really inspiring the way you put it all together as a bunch of students originally as well. And like, what have been some of the most gratifying moments when you've seen audience interactions with the work? Have you had any sort of really memorable, I guess, points of breakthrough or conversation that you can share?
Actually, I'm normally running around doing stuff, so I don't normally interact with the audience, unfortunately, because there's just so much going on. But we've had people, write things about the work, and I think it really opened a lot of conversations for people in this idea of abolition, because I think when it first started, it wasn't a mainstream conversation. So then it, became a space of education and imagining. So like, what does this look like when we're not policing people, when we're not incarcerating people, when we're not surveilling people? And that idea kind of just, made people want to educate themselves more, but also trying to imagine, because we've been so deeply socialized of this sort of being in the world.
Mm. I've got a question from M in the Q&A, and she's saying, do you make a distinction in regard to abolition between prison industrial complex and private militia groups targeting anti-racial, anti-colonial activism? How do you demand accountability? How to have conversations? Question mark. Yeah, how do we have conversations with those sorts of people? Thank you.
Can you read that question one more time?
Do you make a distinction in regard to abolition between the prison industrial complex and private militia groups targeting anti-racial activism? How do we demand accountability? How to have conversations?
My work is specifically in regards to the PIC. So I actually don't, my work doesn't address the other group, but I think this idea of abolition then switches our way of accountability. And what we talk about is punishment based accountability versus care-based accountability, because we're understanding that ideas of, incarceration is perpetuating trauma and harm. So I think we're shifting, ways in which we hold people accountable, but it's not directly addressing those group of people. Is specific to the PIC in terms of systems.
Right, that's enough for one person right now, I guess. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, you've got an amazing, I urge everyone to go and check out Bri Mims's website. And you've got an amazing notes to self guide, which I've always found really awesome. And all of the things in there are really interesting. One of them is touch everything, hold nothing. Can you elaborate on what that means?
Yeah, that is literally one of my favorite quotes. So I read this book called Instinct by T.D. Jakes. And he's basically kind of typically known as a pastor, but he wears many hats. And I read this book when I was in high school, actually. And I loved the book so much that I went to a talk. And he was talking about his success. And he said, my ability to juggle in a multitude of jungles is to touch, the key to that is to touch everything and hold nothing. So what he was saying is, the key to his success was his ability to juggle in a multitude of jungles. And in order to do that, you have to touch everything and hold nothing. And that really resonated with me because at that point, I really just saw myself as a dancer, and I was very defined by what I was supposed to be doing, what my career path looked like. But I felt like there was so much more inside of me that I needed to express, so many other skills, talents, and gifts that I needed to kind of hone into. So that moment was kind of a release of being defined by those sort of labels, but it was also kind of a lesson in regards to letting go, in terms of when I'm birthing things, when I have a vision, I don't want to hold those things for too long. And that could be physical in terms of knowing when to step away, but it's also not being married to what I envision things looking like. So in a lot of my work, I feel like it's evolving outside of myself, because it's not like I want it to be this way and this is how it's going to turn out. I have to let it do what it needs to do. And that shifts from many different standpoints. And it just feels so beautiful in so many ways when those moments of alignment come. But if I try to hold it for too long, then I stifle what it's supposed to be. And so that kind of constantly reminds me of that. But I feel like there's so much to unpack in that quote. And every year it's kind of teaching me more and more. But right now I feel like it's like, don't be defined by these labels that you have chosen for yourself, but also learn when to take your hand off of things, let things grow and evolve as they need to, because it's not yours, like it's coming through you.
Right. I've seen nods from the group. Does that chime with how you guys see your art making as well? Yeah. Bri, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, there are so many more questions, and hopefully we can get some sent to you from the Q&A. We can be asking questions to everyone all night. But I really do urge everyone to check out Bri's website and work. It's just really inspiring, and yeah, I've been really glad to see it in person when I've had the opportunity. Mato, I wanted to ask you, you were born and raised in South Dakota as a member of the Oglala Lakota Sioux tribe. What are some of your experiences of growing up that have manifested themselves in your art today, and the artistic choices that you make?
That's a good question. I think for me, they've always been very intertwined in terms of my love for music and everything and my culture. And I would say there was a lot of internalized issues that I dealt with growing up, being Native and living in a predominantly white space. And so I think of it as like music, falling in love with music helped me fall in love with my culture. And so that being said, there's always been this tie of trying to represent my people and my community with the utmost authenticity and gratitude, while also showing the contemporary nature of us and how we rock. Because I think a lot of people think of indigenous people, and specifically as like Northern Native Americans, as like antiquated. And so, yeah, I'm trying to give a new light to things.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we can, let's take a look at some of that. So you're obviously a musician, but you're a filmmaker too. You studied cinematic arts, and this video is called Hooky. It was released, like in August 2019. And I think it has some interesting kind of like different takes on some of the stuff that you've just said. And I do want to just warn our audience that Mato's video contains some strong language and some pretty intense imagery at points. So just a disclaimer there, but please don't look away because you'll be missing out. I just wanted to put that out there. Seeing lots of claps. Mato's talking to someone right now.
Oh yeah, so
yeah, I just want to, I mean, there's so much in that video, I guess in 3 sections. Just tell us a little bit about that. What you're aiming for there?
Yeah, so the album that song is off of is called Scatterbrain, and that released last fall, 2019. And so the whole project, I got inspired by doing a lot of research on boarding schools that a lot of Native youth were sent to back in the early 20th century. And so like my grandma is a descendant of the boarding schools in South Dakota. And so this idea of education and culture kind of became the theme for a lot of the work. And so growing up, I always was horrible in school. Like I got into USC on some sheer luck. And so, but growing up, I could never pay attention. It was a constant struggle to try to, stay attentive and everything like that. So the whole album is kind of depicting that insecurity mixed with a lot of the historical significance of boarding schools. And so it was this idea of education, whether it be forced or anything like that. So the music video itself is me and my friend Jamal, and we're skipping school. And so that's our day of playing hooky. So we're running around, having pool parties, having, very eloquent dinners with our indigenous friends. And I have 2 of the castmates here today. Say hello to DA and Becca.
Amazing, that's who you're talking to.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was a super fun video to make. My friend Taylor, who is she graduated as well. She was in the film school. She directed it. And so it was a very dope homegrown effort of making that come together. So, yeah.
And how do you jump between, like I said, you studied cinema, and it feels like the visual aspect to your work is as important as your music in some ways, and the way you communicate messages. How do you find that balance?
I don't know if I do. It's a lot, I think. But to me, they've always been married, the two. And I feel like even today's age with TikTok and all these different applications, it's so interchangeable in terms of music and media and mixed media and everything. So to me, it's always been really intertwined. And so it never really felt like, it was always second nature, I guess. Like whenever I'm making a new song or writing something or producing anything, visuals come to mind automatically. And so for this, since the song is really chaotic and trappy and stuff, I needed the visuals to match that. So those were conversations that the director and I had together, and she has a really great energy that she brings to all of her projects. And so I knew that she could like execute to the fullest extent.
Amazing. My last question for you, I've been doing my homework, and I read an interview that you gave, which was really interesting. And you said in it, I think this maybe goes back to what you were saying about generations earlier. You said, I think what I can do in my lifetime and through the generations I passed down is show that there's a oneness. Native kids in Pine Ridge, South Dakota, go through the same things that kids in Detroit go through. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a quick aside to that. So for a couple years, I was involved in this nonprofit organization called Outlast. And the whole goal of that organization was to bridge the gap between Black and Indigenous youth through different art forms. And so for me, you know, growing up, going to the reservation and having family out there and spending a lot of time, and then going to a school like USC and getting involved in the community, you see the through lines through a lot of this youth. And a lot of them is just stems from not having economic opportunity, not having educational opportunity. And so I just see the similarities are so, I don't know, embedded in the way you grow up in this country. And so for me, it's been the art that has been able to try to communicate the bridging of gaps. And so even like the music I do, you know, hip hop, and that's Black culture. And so me being a Native person and using that to convey my messages and express myself is a means of trying to do that.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I'd love to, maybe you could share that organization in the chat for people so they can find out more. It'd be great. All right, Jakevis, you've been on a creative tear since graduating this year. Has graduation been like you thought it would be?
Yes, for sure, definitely, 100%. I definitely thought it would be virtual, staying in my room. That's how I imagined it. I don't know if anyone saw it differently. No, but yeah, things have definitely shifted a lot, and definitely shows in my work after I graduated. I think it just happened to be a need for myself. I was wanting to create, and being in quarantine at the time, I was struggling to find ways to still be active creatively, and I was looking for that. And the films came about, and well, actually before that, I was filming things myself, just personally, and posting it on my social media. And then that's when a lot of the racial injustices started to pop up in the media, which they've always been here. It's just they happen to get more publicity since we're all not doing anything on our phones and recording and all of this and that. But since that was coming about in the media, I saw that as an opportunity to not only share my work, but inform and educate other people on other questions that were coming from friends and family members of my own, or people who I consider to be family, about what to do, what's going on, what's happening. And so I decided to just kind of use everything that I've been trained to do, my need to create, and also the want to educate and inform people, use that all as one and create these short films to share with people. And yeah, that's what's been since graduating.
Yeah, I think we've got a trailer for you. Amazing summary of your work. Saying life, someone just wrote life in the chat. Love this. Yes, so great. I mean, a lot of this is just, you've made this in the last couple of months, and I'm wondering, like, in the deluge of bad news and atrocities that are committed, still within your work, within what we've just seen, so many different emotions, from joy, power, grief, rage. Like, how have you remained focused and intentional about what you want to say and make at different moments? Like, or have you just felt buffeted by the news in some respects about what you choreograph?
Yeah, I think just trying to channel that anger and frustration that I was feeling, and to use that to like light a fire in my butt to create more work and to show how we can always overcome this, but also at the same time juxtaposing that and showing what is actually happening, what's going on, that we're being murdered, we're dying. And it's not just what you're seeing through a screen, it's people who are close to you. Like, we are George Floyd, we are Breonna Taylor, like, we are these people, and it's us. And I think it just makes it more of a reality and less of sort of, I think that's what takes it out of this film aspect, or it's just happening through a screen or whatever. Like, this is actually what's going on. And yeah, I wanted to show that a sense of liveliness in juxtaposition of the death that you're seeing all the time, of police brutality, the violence, the anger, the riots. I wanted to show also another side of that. And yeah, so joy is definitely something I wanted to highlight in all of my videos, as well as the death and murders that's been going on.
Yeah, and as a follow-up to that, I guess I'm wondering, like, what is it about dance that you feel like Mato, or like a lot of your work, it's like the cinematic aspect with your primary art form. And what is it about dance that you feel has so much to say in terms of social justice movements and what it can do?
Yeah, so dance is a universal language that no matter if you've experienced it or not physically, or you just visually seen it, you understand it, and it crosses all cultures and species. So everyone understands dance or just movement in general. And so when it comes to dance is also used as storytelling. So as I'm creating this once you add context and, let's say, costumes, outfits, casting, cinematography, all of that's used to emphasize what you're trying to say or what you're trying to portray. So storytelling in that sense of what's happening now, but also what has been happening, what's been going on in the past, what's going on now, where do we want to go in the future? I feel like dance has that capacity to tell all of that and even more. But yeah, really focusing on dance being a universal language and speaking in ways that words can't all the time.
Bri, does that resonate with you?
Yes, for sure. And Don just said something in the chat in regards to the body being political, and then just also the memories and experiences that we hold in our bodies.
Yes, Black people.
I think that's something that memory is something too that plays along with what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's definitely something that I wanted to show. Like, it goes further than just what is being seen, what you can visually see. Like she just said, that knowledge and history that's naturally embedded in us as Black people, and also what we've given to dance as far as like the African diaspora, like really showing all those elements. In all my films, I want to emphasize polycentrism, polyrhythms, rhythm, dimensionality, euphemism, useful attack, like all of that is incorporated in my work and my dance, and that's things that the Black body has given to culture in general, and that's something that I definitely wanted to emphasize.
And for those, I mean, we didn't get to see the full duration of your films, but Black Parade, which I think has had like 200,000 views now, at the end of that music video is like 40 dancers on a roof. And I was wondering, it looks like a lot of fun to make those videos. What's it like having 30 dancers taking direction from you, and what's in your brain?
It's great, just to feel everybody's energy. I talk about perspective a lot in other interviews that I've had, just because I feel like perspective is a really big problem that we have when trying to get people to understand what's happening, how you can help, why it's wrong, because people really don't understand that. And it's all based on perspective, things that we've experienced. And like we just said, things that are naturally embedded in us. Of course, when we talk about slavery, Black people are going to feel a lot heavier about it than people who are not of color, because that's something that has happened to people like us, people who look like us. I don't expect you to feel that same exact way. I do expect you to understand your perspective and mine, but I do feel like perspective comes into play a lot. So when you're with a group of people who all share that same kind of perspective as you, knowledge of history, where you're wanting to go, have that same kind of feeling of while we're dancing and what we're trying to get this video out for, it just feels good. That energy, it's just unexplainable. And yeah, it feels great. I think it also feels good to know that we're working on something as a group, working on something that's gonna outlive us. We were talking about reputation, or just what we want to pass down to next generations. And I think the fact that we all were working on something that we knew that was going to be filmed and that hopefully will stay here for a longer time than us, I think it's nice. We want to start contributing to things that are going to outgrow us. Because like I said, tomorrow's not promised. So leaving that behind and knowing that's going to be passed down to other people, or hopefully other people will see that and want to learn more, or get something from that, I think is great. It's the energy is what's important. It's really unexplainable. You have to feel the energy of everyone together. It's a community for sure.
Yeah. I'm seeing Dana just says, "Preach, Jakevis."
Thank you.
What's up, Mama?
Oh, my mom's in here too.
Oh, nice.
I love that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I, like with all of you guys, I wish we had more time to spend on each of your work. But I do encourage you to follow up with Jakevis's films and music and choreography. It's just awesome. And this is like, I guess it's a nice transition to the kind of the last guest that we have, because as I said at the beginning, Anushka, you are you're still a current student at USC. So we're talking about generations and passing things down. I guess you're right in the middle of it still with completing your studies. And we've heard from, you know, from music, from dance, from film, and this is different with GEN-ZiNE. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about where the need for GEN-ZiNE came from, and that fire which was kind of lit in you to create a peer-to-peer publication at USC.
Totally. I just want to start off by saying I am so inspired by all of you, and I look up to you all, and I have so much to learn from you guys. So thank you for being here, and I'm honored to be included with you all. For me, when I was in high school, I felt this itching need to redesign a publication. I love magazines, or some form of mass media that we all touch, we all see every day, and have it regard social change. And I feel like that's something that was missing, at least from the media that I was consuming every day. And as you've all explained already, like the media, the art, the culture that we produce impacts us so much, and the way that we think and the way that we approach the world as individuals and as a community. And so when I got to USC, I figured out that that term was called Designing Media for Social Change. And I took a class where I was able to produce my own piece of media. And so I co-founded GEN-ZiNE with my peers, Sam and Eden. And GEN-ZiNE is about addressing contemporary issues through the eyes of Generation Z. And it's evolved into this community as well as print publication where normal Gen Zers, normal writers, people who don't consider themselves writers, people who don't consider themselves activists can come and educate one another and to either tell their story or to just speak on an issue that affects them in their day-to-day life or a problem that they see in the world. And it gives them some sort of confidence, empowerment. And I do believe that that peer-to-peer interaction, especially when it's within our community and you see who wrote this article and who wrote that article, it holds a little bit more weight in the word of the conversations we're having, because it's a little bit outside of the norm compared to the typical chatter we have.
Yeah, I mean, let's take a look. We're going to share a screen now and take a look at some of the massive amount of work that you've been doing with your most recent effort, which is an election guidebook. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about the need for this particular publication and what's gone into that and what you're hoping to do with it. It's like 88 pages long, I think, which is amazing.
Yeah. So this is our 5th print issue. We started out as just a print publication and eventually it grew to online as well. Our online community, aka Instagram, which just became a place for more writers to join in because our topics, whatever. Our print issues are specifically themed from gendered violence to health and wellness, sustainability, multiculturalism, and now the election guidebook. And so the community is for people who want to write about topics that aren't in print. But basically this election guidebook was meant to be the Gen Zer starting place for both this upcoming election as well as American politics at large. This has been an incredible learning experience for me. Each issue has, being able to interact with like the best and brightest minds who are extremely passionate about politics, and they get to teach me, and then we get to publish something that continues to teach others. And this issue is really important to me because it includes a lot of authors from around the country, and it has a large range of content from, as you can see, election interference and political disruption, but also going to the more current topics such as how COVID shapes this election and puts the government in a new light. And also we have a big survey that we did with some of our readers about Gen Z sentiments about the government and American politics at large. And though this is an educational tool, it's also a documentation and an archive of what we felt and what we believed in for this election, and is a place to always hold that passion and remember that as well.
Yeah, huge amount of work. What's been what have been some of the most gratifying moments from doing this? You know, what are some of the memorable things that you, and also the challenges, I guess, of actually having to like put this all together?
After I put this out, I mean, as an artist or anyone, any creative, it's always nerve-wracking when you put out a piece of work. You're like, I don't know how people are going to interact with this. And one of my friends said to me, well, what was the goal? And I was like, well, the goal was to create something with my peers. And I always feel a huge amount of community and kind of power anytime we put an issue out, because you get to interact. I get to interact with people who I wouldn't have before, and it's a chance to engage in such an intellectual way, whereas sometimes I feel like that's missing from our mainstream discourse. It just allows me to get so much deeper with strangers and use our words, and I know that you guys use your bodies and voice in different ways, but for me it's just so it's a value to engage in these heavier conversations. And for me, it's what can we teach each other and what can we create together. And one day it'll be about how many people we can reach and how we can measure impact metrics and whatnot. But today it really is about community and the power of rising up together.
Yeah, thank you. I read in your editor's note to this edition as well, you talk about countering themes of individualism and competition. And I think it feels like particularly relevant to a higher education institution where that's so much a challenge for all students, the kind of the way that they're pitted against each other in some senses. And do you feel like it's been a community effort just to build community for the sake of it as well?
Definitely. That is a very, very true statement. It's like if we can light a other to compete against one another, why can't we positively influence and inspire one another instead? And instead of forming this like competitive divisiveness of starting a project in college, it's like, this is all of our work. The more the merrier. And even though it exists in print or online, it's still about feeling different. Like I felt a shift over the past 2 years with everyone, with the physical community around me, and just incorporating GEN-ZiNE into our conversations every day, and that sense of approaching the world with like compassion, critical thought, curiosity, and just care, genuine care for one another, and stories that are outside of our periphery is huge to me. And another driving force is that we're all so caught up in what we're going to do with our lives. And a lot of people look at activism or having a career that is driven to help others as all consuming, but it's about making a difference wherever you are, however you are. And it doesn't have to be this, it should just be a part of all of our mindsets, truly.
Yeah, thank you. We posted a link to GEN-ZiNE in the chat, and for anyone who's kind of like tired of scrolling through CNN like live updates about the terrible stuff which is happening all over the country, I'd advise you just to go and read GEN-ZiNE and inform yourself in a more therapeutic way. It's really amazing amount of work you put into it. I'm seeing lots of comments come in thanking people for the pride that you're making people feel, all of you. So thank you very much for that. I wanted to ask you guys, outside of Anushka, all of you actually, as we kind of close today's event, like if you had a piece of advice for other young folks looking to start projects as artists, as activists, you know, addressing white supremacy, making change, what would be a piece of advice that you would share? We heard Bri talking earlier about touch everything, hold nothing. You guys got some advice that you would share to your other, your peers?
I just want to say it doesn't go unless you do. Instead of waiting for an opportunity to come, instead of waiting for the right moment in time, in history, in a social climate to enter and create a project, create it. And that is both one of the most satisfying yet challenging parts of, I think, being a creative at this age, is we're all juggling a lot. And so it's kind of an added pressure on your shoulders. But at the same time, when you realize that you just hold the power to create, it's one of the most magical things.
I would just say, for advice, I would say make room for yourself when you feel like there isn't room for you. I feel like there's a lot of times where you can be either told no or feeling like you don't fit in somewhere, or trying to find a place to fit in and you can never find it because you need to make room for yourself. So be very open to that. And also, I had something else I was about to say, but it just went away. But yeah. Oh, also, it's okay not to have the answer to everything. I think having the eagerness to figure out how to, I guess, maneuver through life in general, or whatever journey that you're trying to go on creatively, or whether you're trying to create something. Yeah, I feel like don't always feel like you have to have the right answers or feel like you're making the right moves. It's okay to have mess ups, and it's okay not to know what's happening or what's going on, just to figure that out for yourself.
No, I definitely don't know.
I would say what helped me a lot, and some advice I can give, is like finding some sort of mentor, whether that be a physical person or just something that you can find online or something. And then a lot of like educating yourself on who and what came before you and what it is you want to bring to the table. And I would say, in terms of like dismantling any hierarchies or white supremacy, for example, is I think it's important to educate yourself on the subject, and then also like define what it is you're dismantling and why you're dismantling it. That can kind of make things more, I guess, tangible. And yeah, those are my advice.
The only other thing that I would add is kind of stemming off of what Mato was saying, is to do the work within yourself first. I think even as people of color, even as Black people, there's a lot of ways in which we've been socialized by white supremacy, and the ways in which we see the world, we choose to walk through the world, the language we use, all, like so many things. And so I think it's important to start with yourself. And that's a continuous process. Like, I'm still amazed every day by things. I'm like, man, that was white supremacy. But my language is constantly shifting. But that, and I think building community and feeding your craft, and I think the culmination of those things with listening, things should flow.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm seeing lots of comments come in saying how inspiring it is to hear you guys speak on these subjects. There was a question. I don't know if we have time for a question, but talking about the healthy balance of involvement and detachment in order to stay progressive motion in the long term. And I guess that speaks to what you guys are saying about feeding yourselves and nourishing that sense of well-being. I just wanted to kind of close by saying to our audiences today that obviously the decision to take on being an artist and a creator is such a difficult one in any circumstances, and right now it's super fraught. And so all these 4 young folks are so deserving of your attention and time, and I would really urge you to check out all of their work as they continue to go on and do more wonderful things with it. It's really inspiring, like I think we said, to see people who are just taking that leap and not waiting. It certainly gives me a huge amount of hope for the students we have here at USC, looking up to you guys with that. I wanted to give you guys the chance to sign off with a final few comments before we say goodbye. Anything you wanted to add before I give some information about the rest of the events that we have coming up? I'm seeing crickets. This is super awkward.
Thank you all for being here and listening.
Yeah.
Oh, I also have an event launched tomorrow of a project called Letters from the TUI. So if you type in lettersfromthetui.com, my new project is launching tomorrow. You can find me on IG and get all the information.
Come on, shameless plug. We love it.
Can you put that in the chat, Bri? Put the name of the project so people can actually see it. I see a question saying, will it be possible to see this recording again? Yep, we're recording it. It will be on Visions and Voices YouTube. This event is part of a series, like I said at the beginning, called Foresight Is 2020, Racial Justice in the Arts. Tonight was our, alumni and student voices. Tomorrow we'll be hearing from faculty and fellows from the Annenberg Civic Media Lab for an event called Arts, Activism and the Academy, Addressing Racism Within Higher Education. We've got some wonderful guests coming for that, so please join us tomorrow at 6:30. I need to check that. It's on the Visions and Voices site. That should be a great conversation. Oh, 7 p.m. I'm seeing. Thank you to my co-workers for posting that. On Wednesday, we have an interactive workshop called Racial Radical, Generating New Woke Words, which is 3 Milwaukee poets who will be working with participants to develop new words around race. And so please check out both of those events. They should be brilliant. Thank you again to all of you for joining us. And I implore you to check out these guys' work, as I said. Last thing is to say is remember to vote. Please vote, everybody. And stay sane and healthy in the weeks to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.